Here's a question that almost nobody asks. How does a region that covers less than 10% of the Earth's land surface house 60% of its human population? The answer is not technology, not geography, not luck. The answer grows in a rice paddy. Today, rice provides 20% of all the calories consumed by human beings on this planet. More than 4 billion people depend on it every single day. It has shaped cultures, legal systems, structures of power, and according to some researchers, the very way that Asian societies think. But the story of rice is not just about food. It's about how one plant forced human beings to become engineers, diplomats, and democrats. Not because they chose to, because the plant gave them no other option. This is the history of rice. Hunan Province, China, 16,000 years ago. Inside Yuchanyan Cave, among animal bones and fragments of stone tools, archaeologists found something almost invisible: 4 grains of rice. Their size was slightly larger than the wild rice growing in the surrounding area. A small detail, but an important one. It meant the people living in that cave had already started selecting the best seeds to keep. This wasn't farming, not yet, but it was the first step toward farming. The ancestor of every rice variety we know today, Oryza rufipogon, grew in the marshes and riverbeds of East and Southeast Asia. It lived where the ground was flooded, its roots buried in mud, its stalks reaching up above the water. Harvesting wild rice was not easy work. The grains fell off when they ripened. They had to be gathered one by one or knocked into a container before hitting the water, in swamps full of mosquitoes, snakes, and ground that was always wet. But people kept coming back, because nothing else could match the caloric density of a flooded field full of wild rice. Lower Yangtze River Valley, 9 to 10,000 years ago. At the sites of Shangshan and Jiahu, researchers found ceramic vessels mixed with rice husks dated between 8,000 and 7,000 years before the Common Era. Not just food scraps, evidence that rice had already become a regular part of daily life. Geneticist Jean-Marie Molina traced the key genetic change that separates domestic rice from wild rice. It comes down to a single gene, one that controls whether a grain falls off the stalk when it ripens. Wild rice falls, so it can spread. Domestic rice stays attached. Humans, without realizing it, always selected the plants that were easiest to harvest, and the easiest to harvest were the ones whose grains didn't fall before you could pick them. But rice carried a complication that wheat and corn never had. Rice grows in water, and managing water turned out to be the largest civil engineering project in human history. Far larger and far more complex than building any pyramid. To grow rice at a scale large enough to feed a community, you have to manage water. You have to build paddy walls, small earthen barriers that divide the fields into separate sections that can be flooded and drained independently. You have to dig irrigation channels running from the river to the fields. You have to control the water level with precision. Too shallow, and the rice dies of thirst. Too deep, and it drowns. And all of this has to be done together. An irrigation system is an interconnected network. One farmer who opens or closes a channel carelessly can destroy an entire village's harvest. One selfish decision can ruin the work of hundreds of people. You cannot farm rice alone. You cannot be an individualist in the middle of a rice paddy. Rice is a plant that creates societies, and the societies it created were not hierarchical systems ruled by one powerful person. They were systems organized around shared need, where every member had equal rights and equal obligations toward a water supply that belonged to everyone. The clearest example of this is the Subak system in Bali. Subak was not created by a government, not created by a king. It grew organically from the need of farmers to manage water together. Every farmer, no matter how wealthy or poor, no matter how large or small their land, had an equal voice in decisions about water distribution. There were strict rotation schedules, penalties for violations, ritual ceremonies that reinforced the social bonds holding the whole system together. UNESCO recognized Subak as a World Heritage Site in 2012, not just for its historical value, but because it still works today. Thousands of years before anyone wrote a theory of democracy, rice was already forcing people to practice it. James C. Scott of Yale University made a provocative argument in his book Against the Grain. Rice, he said, is the ideal crop for a state. Not because it feeds people, because it's easy to control. Rice grows above ground, visible from a distance. It ripens all at once. Every farmer in a region harvests at nearly the same time. It has to be stored in large granaries that cannot be hidden. For ancient tax collectors, rice was a dream. Unlike root vegetables that could be buried underground, or livestock that could be driven into the forest, rice couldn't be hidden. It sat there in the open paddy, waiting to be counted. The great kingdoms of Asia, from Majapahit to the Tang dynasty, built their power on control of irrigation systems and rice granaries. Whoever controlled the water, controlled the rice. Whoever controlled the rice, controlled the people. But there is a deep irony here. The same system that enabled centralized power, large-scale irrigation, also created highly organized farming communities with very strong local autonomy. The people who knew best how to manage the water were the farmers themselves, not the bureaucrats in the capital. In feudal Japan, rice farming communities were often more authoritative than samurai in matters of water distribution. Even military rulers rarely dared to directly intervene in a village's irrigation system, because they knew that disrupting it meant the harvest would fail, and a failed harvest meant no taxes, and no taxes meant no army. Rice forced even the powerful to negotiate. From the Yangtze, rice spread across the world through 3 separate paths. Path 1, Southeast Asia. From southern China, rice moved into Southeast Asia between 3,000 and 2,000 years before the Common Era. In Thailand, around 300 years before the Common Era, the dominant variety shifted from Japonica to Indica, a variety better adapted to the hot, humid, tropical climate. Not just the plant that moved, but knowledge that kept evolving to fit local conditions. In Indonesia, the terraced rice paddies of Bali and Taraha are physical evidence of thousands of years of civil engineering passed from generation to generation. Terracing is not just aesthetics. It is water management technology that makes it possible to grow rice on steep slopes that should have been untillable. Path 2, India. Around 2,400 years before the Common Era, Japonica rice from China arrived in the Indus Valley. There it met Oryza nivara, a local wild rice. The two hybridized. From that crossing came the indica variety, which today dominates rice production across South and Southeast Asia. Domestication did not happen once in one place. It happened multiple times in multiple places by many hands that never knew each other existed. Path 3. Africa. In a completely separate part of the world, the Niger River Delta in West Africa, something remarkable happened. Around 3,200 years ago, communities there independently domesticated their own rice species. Not Oryza sativa from China, Oryza glaberrima, a different species, a different lineage, an entirely separate domestication. Two human populations that never met, facing the same problem, finding the same solution. At Geno in Mali, evidence of Oryza glaberrima cultivation has been dated to between 300 and 200 years before the Common Era. An urban civilization built on African rice. This is the part of rice's history that is least often told. South Carolina, the 17th and 18th centuries. English colonists knew that the climate and swamplands of that region were perfect for rice. They had land, they had capital. What they didn't have was knowledge. They didn't know how to build rice paddies. They didn't know how to manage water in swamp terrain. They didn't know how to seed, transplant, and harvest rice in tropical conditions. So they found people who did. Slave traders actively sought and purchased people from rice farming communities in West Africa, particularly from Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Senegambia, regions where Oryza glaberrima had been cultivated for thousands of years, where knowledge of rice was passed from generation to generation as a fundamental life skill. Historian Daniel Littlefield documented how the success of the rice industry in South Carolina depended directly on the technical expertise of enslaved Africans. The way they built paddy walls, the way they designed drainage systems, the traditional tools they carried from Africa. All of it became the foundation of an industry that by the 18th century produced more than half of South Carolina's exports. Knowledge built over thousands of years in West Africa, stolen through the slave trade, used to build the wealth of colonizers, without acknowledgement and without compensation. The plant that in Africa represented autonomy and collective intelligence became in America an instrument of one of the most brutal systems of exploitation the world has ever seen. There is a study that changed the way we understand the relationship between rice and people. Not about agriculture, not about history, about psychology. Psychologist Thomas Talhelm published a study in 2014 in the journal Science with a hypothesis that surprised many people. The difference between East Asian societies that tend toward collectivism and Western societies that tend toward individualism, long assumed to be a product of philosophy or religion, might be rooted in something much simpler: the crops they farmed. In China, regions that traditionally farmed rice showed far more collectivist thinking than regions that farmed wheat. People from rice regions were more likely to define themselves through their relationships, more likely to avoid direct conflict, more likely to help members of their group. People from wheat regions, a crop that can be planted and harvested by a single person without needing to collaborate, were more individualistic, more analytical, more comfortable with direct confrontation. The research is controversial. Human culture cannot be reduced to one variable. But the core idea is hard to entirely dismiss. The way we farmed for thousands of years may have shaped the way we think and interact. Rice may not only have fed the bodies of Asian people, it may have helped shape their minds. Today, rice faces a threat it has never faced in 12,000 years of domestication. Climate change. Growing rice in flooded paddies requires around 300 liters of water to produce just 1 ounce of grain. In a hotter world, where monsoon rainfall patterns are becoming less and less predictable, the water supply for rice paddies is increasingly uncertain. In Bangladesh, rising sea levels threaten to flood millions of hectares of paddy fields with saltwater. In India, the Himalayan glaciers that for thousands of years acted as natural water tanks feeding the rivers that irrigate the Ganges plain are melting faster than they can be replenished. Scientists at the International Rice Research Institute are working hard to develop new varieties that are more drought-resistant and more efficient with water. But technology only solves part of the problem. Of the tens of thousands of rice varieties once cultivated by farmers across Asia, varieties that had adapted over thousands of years to very specific local conditions, today more than 90% of global production comes from just a handful of commercial varieties. Knowledge built over 12,000 years, stored in seeds passed from farmer to farmer, is quietly disappearing. Just like nixtamalization, almost forgotten because it was considered primitive. History repeats. Four grains, found in the ground, 16,000 years old. From those 4 grains grew an agricultural system that today feeds 4 billion people. That ratio, 4 grains to 4 billion, may be the greatest achievement in the entire history of our species, and almost nobody realizes it. Rice taught us about the power of collaboration, that there are problems that cannot be solved alone, that force us to make agreements, build trust, and create systems that are fair for everyone. But rice also taught us about the danger of dependence. When an entire civilization relies on one plant, one water source, one system that cannot be allowed to fail, it becomes fragile. Today, more than 90% of global rice production comes from just a handful of commercial varieties. Thousands of local varieties built over 12,000 years, quietly disappearing. Not because of disaster, because we decided they weren't efficient enough. In a world changing faster than anything we have experienced before, the question of rice is no longer just about farming. It is about the survival of civilization. 4 grains hold 12,000 years of human intelligence. The question is whether we are wise enough not to waste it.